Good evening from the land of Israel. This is Lazer Brody with the Muna Hour. We're continuing in the book of Ruth, chapter 2. Bezrat Hashem. Last week we learned in chapter 1 the circumstances of how Elimelech and Naomi with their two sons, Kilion and Machlon, left the land of Israel. They went to Moab, which is today's Jordan. Moab is a very hostile place. They're one of Israel's arch enemies. But in order to avoid the famine, Elimelech was very rich, and he wanted to preserve his money so that the poor people would not run after him. He left Israel, but as divine justice in Moab, he lost everything. Not only did he lose all his money, he lost his life. Naomi was left with no husband. Ultimately, her sons, now that Elimelech wasn't around, her sons didn't have a barrier to marry Moabite women. They didn't marry Moabite women as long as their father was alive. But they were from a very prestigious family from the tribe of Judah. And they married, each of the boys married one of the daughters of Eglon, the king of Moab. Machlon married Ruth, and Kilion married Orpah. And ultimately, both, they died. So Orpah and Ruth, the Moabite girls, were left widows. They clung to Naomi. They right away, Orpah took a few steps and she went back to her old life. Ruth stubbornly wanted to continue with Naomi. She wouldn't leave Naomi. She says, your people are my people, the famous expression that your God is my God, your land is my land. And we now continue on. They came impoverished and barely barefoot, wearing burlap sacks. They came back with nothing to the land of Israel, to their old tribal lands in Bethlehem. And as they come into Bethlehem, it's a tremendous commotion. Chapter 1 ends with people saying, is that Naomi? And she says, don't call me Naomi. Naomi in Hebrew means something very pleasant. She says, call me bitter, Mara. And so we see them in absolute poverty. So now they need something to eat. They have no money, no food, no clothes, and they get some kind of lean-to put over their head. They have some kind of temporary dwelling. And this is the stage we begin chapter 2. Chapter 2 shows us a chance encounter that will change the course of history to this very day and determine Mashiach. And we'll see what Hashem has to do to work around, to fool the evil inclination. The evil inclination says to Hashem, if you bring Mashiach, my job is finished. There's no longer free choice. It cancel the world. So Hashem has to do it in such a way that the evil inclination doesn't even know about. So we see this is exactly what happened in the story of Yehuda and Tamar. And we see where this all started. This starts, Mashiach goes way back, Mashiach's ancestors. It was an incestual relationship with Lot and his two daughters. See what Hashem has to do, unbelievable things that Hashem does, and we could see that something that looked like the weirdest thing you can understand, it turns out to be Mashiach. Okay, well, in our concluding lesson, we will cover this. We'll conclude all of this, how Mashiach comes about and how we hope to soon see him. We hope, just one thing, because of our trip to the UK 2 weeks from tonight, there won't be a lesson. And so next week, we hope to do chapters 3 and 4, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, so now we've been chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, this her deceased husband Elimelech, a mighty man of valor from the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. Okay, Rashi explains this. What's the kinsman? There were 4 brothers. Now, you know the famous Nachshon ben Aminadav. Nachshon ben Aminadav, he was the president of the tribe of Judah. He is the one that first jumped into the Red Sea. That the Israelites at the Red Sea, they had the Egyptians behind them, the desert to the right and left of them. They had nowhere to go, and they didn't have their advanced swimming licenses, or they couldn't swim. They're desert people. And so Nachshon jumped into the water. As he jumped into the water in total dedication, Hashem split the Red Sea. Hashem did not split the Red Sea until Nachshon ben Aminadav jumped in the water. So we see Nachshon, this is a characteristic of Nachshon, the tribe of Judah, and all Nachshon's offspring, which included Boaz and later King David. And ultimately Mashiach is a measure of total dedication, total self-sacrifice to do Hashem's will, and to dedicate themselves for the nation, for the Israelite nation. Okay, so now we have, Rashi explains to us, this is the family line. Nachshon had 4 sons. One of the sons was Elimelech. One of the sons was Salmon. Salmon was Boaz's father. One of the sons was Naomi's father. And the other son was Ploni. That Ploni means somebody. They don't mention the name because the book of Ruth doesn't want to embarrass him. We will be introduced to Ploni in chapter 4. Ploni actually had a closer, tiny bit closer family relationship to Naomi than Boaz did, because Ploni was Naomi's uncle, where Boaz was Naomi's first cousin. This is going to be critical in who inherits the land inheritance of Elimelech. This is part of the Naomi, her inheritance is part of her husband's, and this goes along. It goes with the man, from man to man, the inheritance, the tribal inheritance. Why does it go from man to man? Because if a woman marries a different tribe and it's her inheritance, then tribal lands will go to a different tribe. So when we have the tribal distribution of lands in the land of Israel, then the inheritance goes according from father to son. If there's no son, then the daughter gets it. Okay, this is the case of Slavchan. All right, so we have 4 sons of Aminadav. One was Elimelech, which Elimelech married his niece. This was often common in ancient Israel. It's just Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was Abraham's niece. So Elimelech married his niece, his brother's daughter. This is Naomi. Okay, and this, we see that Solomon, one of the brothers, had a son, Boaz. Boaz, as the Megillah tells us, the Megillah of Ruth, the book of Ruth tells us, he was a mighty man, he was a righteous man, he was a Torah scholar, he was a rich landowner, and also a very high-level religious court judge. And he was one of the sages of that generation. In verse 2, and Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, I will now go to the field, and I will glean among the ears of grain after someone with whom I please. And she said, go, my daughter. So Ruth, remember, she's the daughter of a king, but now they're outright impoverished. They have nothing. They have no food, no money. And this is Ruth's dedication. Ruth doesn't look at her station in life, oh no, I'm too good to go out. She goes out with the poor women and gleans. What does it mean to glean? This is in Torah law. In Torah law, when a harvester harvests grain, and if grain seeds fall on the ground, he can't pick up the seeds. He can take the sheaths, and he binds the sheaths, and take the sheaths in the bundle, take the sheath bundles. But even if a stalk of grain falls from a sheath, you can't collect that. If lone kernels of grain fall on the ground, you can't collect that. This is meant for the poor people. This is left for the poor people. So here, Naomi, she's going with the poor people behind the harvesters, and she's going to look at a field. What did she mean? A field that will be pleasing to her, is where people won't yell at her. Hey, get out of here, you Moabite girl! Get out of here! You can't be here. She was obvious that she was a foreigner, and she said, if it's a field where people will be nice to her, yes, come ahead. You can glean with the other poor people. Then okay, she'll go there. And Naomi gave her permission. She said, go, my daughter. So. In verse 3, and she went, and she came, and she gleaned in the field after the reapers. She walked behind the reapers. And the Megillah says her chance. But we said there's no chance. It's all from Micah. The chance is that we turn the letters around. It means only from Hashem. It came to the field that belonged to Boaz. So by chance, no, there's no chance. There's divine direction. But the Megillah says by chance. The Megillah talks in natural terms. The Megillah says by chance, the book of Ruth says, she came to the field of Boaz, that Boaz was the family of Elimelech. Boaz was Elimelech's nephew. Boaz's father was Elimelech's brother. And here she's in the tribal lands of her deceased husband's family. Okay, this is Machlon's family. And she gleaned in the field. And then the Midrash says that when she came, what does it mean? Why does the Torah say, the Megillah says she came and she went? Because she was unfamiliar with the surroundings. So as she came, she didn't know where she was going to go. So she left markers on the road to know, first of all, how to return back to the city, how she could find her way back into the city. And second, that if she had to come back to the field and if it would be a favorable place for her, she'd know where to come back to. So she made these signs and markings. And also we could see Hashem's hand of Hashem's individual precision, divine providence to lead her to the field of Boaz, where she can ultimately meet Boaz. We can see how Hashem is setting the stage for Mashiach in every little detail. And it's mind-boggling. It's really exciting when you look back and you see how Hashem runs the world. Now, we can't see this when it's happening to us. We can't see this once we can only believe in it. That's our emunah. But when we look back and we see that the events are like fine woven fabric, and every weave, every thread is in its right place, we can see what Hashem does. So in verse 4, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, right as Ruth is gleaning. Boaz comes from Bethlehem. He came from Bethlehem. He's got plenty of business to do in Bethlehem. He's the head of the religious court. He's the rabbi of Bethlehem. Everybody comes and asks him questions. He's the sage. He teaches Torah. He also owns the field. So now he just happened to come to the field. Once again, just happened. And he said to the reapers, may the Lord be with you. May Hashem be with you. And they answered him, may Hashem bless you. We see when we greet someone, we're allowed to say Hashem's name because it's a greeting. That's a shalom is one of Hashem's names. You can't say the word shalom in the bathroom. Why can't you say shalom in the bathroom or not in the mikveh, not in the shower? Because it's one of Hashem's names. So they greeted Boaz in the name of Hashem. Boaz greeted the reapers. And you can see what Boaz to his workers. Boaz is the greatest religious court judge of the generation, the greatest Torah scholar of the generation, the richest man of the generation. And you would think that someone like Boaz is a highbrow. Under no circumstances. He greets his workers with respect. So he greets his workers, that the workers are important people. They're the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're the sons of Hashem. And he treats them with absolute respect. So it was a cinch. Everybody loved working for Boaz because you're talking about an egalitarian employer. What's egalitarian? There's no rights like Torah rights. He treats a person the way the Torah says that a person must be treated. Should love your neighbor as yourself. So there was no difference between the way Boaz would speak to a reaper that he would speak to a fellow Torah scholar, a fellow religious court judge. Okay, so Boaz now sees the strange girl in the field, strange young woman in the field. And he doesn't know her because she's not one of his employees, one of the women. So Boaz said to his servant, to one of his workers, who was in charge, the foreman of the reapers, and he said, who's that girl belong to? Who's that maiden belong to? And what was it? I have to look, this is really out of character. There's no way that Boaz, the head rabbinical court in the land of Judah, Torah scholar, distinguished Boaz is already, he's in his 70s. He's going to ask who that young girl is. Well, he's looking for a date. He wouldn't ask about young women. What is Boaz to ask about young women? So Rashi explains it's like a question that the person has to ask. When he says, well, we ask about one of the young women, you ask about the female workers in the field. Who's this one? Who's this one married to? This one's unmarried. Ask about them. But he saw this really modest behavior of this young woman, and she would stand behind the pickers, and she would stand in a way that none of the pickers would see her. And when she would pick up a chaff or piece of grain or a thing of grain, she would bend at the knees, and her long skirt or long burlap skirt, it would cover her. And it wasn't like the other girls that they would bend down. They would bend down and they would lift up from behind and someone could look behind. She was so careful that no one would look at her. And she would start herself that she was so very modest. And he saw this modesty. Okay, so the servant in charge of the reapers in verse 6, he says, she's the Moabite maiden that returned from Naomi in the fields of Moab. So this is two ways you can understand it. Two ways you can understand it, that the foreman says something that is in favor of her, and foreman says something that's against her. There's two different interpretations. One, she came back with Naomi, that she's very loyal to Naomi. And then he says, oh, she's a Moabite woman. They don't even pay attention to her. I don't even know what she's doing here. And he's looking, say, maybe boss, you want us to get rid of her. Okay, so Boaz now says in verse 7, he went up to her, and she says to, Ruth says to Boaz, I will now glean and gather from among the sheaves after the reapers. And she came, and they saw this. The worker said she's been working from morning until night. And where other people, they talk, the girls, they stop and they take a break, they talk. She's been working she's been working steady. Rashi says that she's speaking to herself, not speaking to Boaz, and that she is only, Rashi mentions, she's only feeding forgotten sheaves. Sometimes the poor pickers, when nobody was looking, they take something that was part of a bundle, take something a little more, not her. She did not touch a thing that she wasn't supposed to speak to. So now Boaz turns to her in verse 8. And Boaz said to Ruth, have you not heard, my daughter? Do not glean another field, neither shall you go away from here, and you shall stay with my maidens. What does it mean? Have you not heard? Have you not heard that you're the widow? He takes complete respect to her. He doesn't treat her like a Moabite girl. He treats her like a Jewish widow because she has become a righteous convert. This is this week's Torah portion about honoring the righteous convert. This is exactly what Boaz does. We can see everything Boaz does, it's to the letter according to Torah. And he honors her as a Jewish widow, a righteous convert. He doesn't mention her anything about being Moabitess. What are you doing here? You're not even supposed to be here. You can't leave my field. No. He says, as the widow of Machlon, you have a right to be in my field because we're actually family. And I don't want you to be anywhere else. Okay, not go away and stay with my female workers, my maids. Stay with them. Stay with them and you'll be okay. This is exactly what Ruth, we can see that Ruth, she was on such a high level. She had a bit of prophetic ability because very in the beginning, she said to her mother-in-law, she said to Naomi, I'm going to go to a field where I'll find favor. I'll be pleasing. The field will be pleasing to me and I'll be pleasing to whatever to the field. We don't understand what she means here. Now we understand. Now we understand in verse 8 that she finds favor. This is the encounter where Boaz right away sees. Now, look, this tells us so much about Boaz. If someone would ask us, Boaz, what color eyes does she have? What color hair does she have? How tall is she? What's her figure? None of that all. Boaz, what's he notice? He noticed her character. He noticed her modesty. He looks into her heart. He sees the way she behaves. This is what he's looking at. He's looking at her soul. Everything that the book of Ruth is telling us, that Boaz is looking at the soul of this woman. Guys, this is the way to find a wife. People get it all wrong, and then they have this, so it's high divorce percentages. Look for the good heart. Look for the modesty. Look for the good character. This is the way. This is the way. And we'll see how Ruth finds. She does the same thing. She's not looking for some kind of a movie star, and she's looking for a great too. She can't even believe her good fortune that she's going to get the Torah guy. She doesn't care that he's in his 70s and she's young. That in the beginning, Rashi, the Midrash Ruth tells us that Ruth is 40 years old. Okay, 40 years old, but the Megillah calls her a maiden, like a young woman, as if she's 25. But we know she's 40 because she had been married. She had been married for 10 years in Moab. She had been married years to Machlon, to Naomi's son. And but she didn't get married at a very young age. Okay, so now in verse 9, Boaz says to her, your eyes shall be on the field that they reap, and you shall follow them. And I have ordered my young men not to touch you. She's not going to be, she was very exposed. You're talking about a young woman, a young single woman. Okay, she's a widow. She's in a strange field. And she's foreign. She could have been free game. But no, Boaz is not going to allow that. He sees how modest she is, and she did everything in her effort to be modest, to act modest, to stay out of sight of the male workers. She did everything. It's like, see, sometimes people say a woman complains that she was molested, but she was dressed so unclad and so immodest, and her acting so immodest. And hey, like, what do you want? Here, Ruth did everything in the world to protect herself. And now we see when a person does every hishtadlus, every effort to do the right thing, Hashem gives them extra protection. So Ruth did everything proper to protect herself, to act in a modest way. Now she gets divine protection by way of Boaz. Boaz orders all the male workers, nobody's going to lay a finger on you. Okay. Not only that, if you're thirsty, what do you think? The other girls, if they want to thirsty, they have to go to the well. They have to draw water from the well. No, Boaz says to Ruth, if you're thirsty, you go to the vessels, to the water jugs. He's got the water boy that he draws the jugs, and drink from that, where the water boys, they draw from the well. So what's Boaz telling her? Rashi explains that he's telling her, don't be ashamed and go and drink from the same water vessels that the harvesters are drinking from. So what is it? Boaz says he's going to protect her. Nobody's going to touch her, and she could drink the water. Look how Ruth reacts when Boaz says she can drink the water out of the vessels. Verse 10, and she fell on her face and prostrated herself to the ground. And she said to him, why have I pleased you that you should take the cognizance of me, you should recognize me, saying that I'm a foreigner? I'm not one of the tribe. I'm not a local. I came for you. Don't owe me anything. Why are you doing this favor? Here, we're learning lesson after lesson. Look closer. When a person shows gratitude, and gratitude, this is the basis we explained last week. This is why the Moabites could not come into the congregation, were not accepted as righteous converts, because they were ingrates. They were ingrates, even though that Abraham saved their great-grandfather Lot twice, not once, but twice. They wouldn't even sell bread and water to the Israelites coming out of Egypt on their way to the land of Israel. Not only that, but they hired the wicked soothsayer Bil'am to curse them. They killed Balak, they killed Moab. They said, this Torah says, such ingrates, we don't want this. A murderer, or for a murderer, he could come in, but someone did a robber, yeah, okay, they can perform. But an ingrate, it's very difficult. Ingrate stays an ingrate. A person can serve time in the penitentiary for a capital crime, and he comes out with his penitent. Okay, he's accepted. Not an ingrate, not an ingrate, because the whole essence of the Jewish people were called Yehudim. Yehudim, what's it mean? It's thankers, God thankers. We say all day long, Baruch atah, Baruch atah. We praise Hashem for everything, for everything. So Naomi has this, Ruth has this characteristic of gratitude, and she falls on the ground. Now we'll see when her expression of gratitude for the right to drink the water from the vessels, look, it's going to invoke more blessings. And we'll soon see. So Boaz in verse 11 replies to her, and he says, it has been told to me all you did for your mother-in-law after your husband's death, that you didn't go back. You could have gone back to your father's palace and lived a life of riches as a Moabite princess. You didn't do that. You clung with your mother. You left your own father and mother, and you left your own native land, and you went to a people that you did not know before. So what do we see by the way Samuel the prophet, he wrote the book of Ruth? Why did Samuel prophet, we see in Hebrew, the words he chooses are right out of the Torah chapter of Lech Lecha, when he is explaining, what is Samuel telling us? That Ruth is expressing the behavior and the dedication of Abraham. She's a true daughter of Abraham. Abraham, Lech Lecha me'artzecha, mebeit mamadcha, mebeit avicha. Go out from Hashem commanded Abraham, go out from your land, go out from your homeland, your father's house, to the land I'm going to show you. And this is what Boaz is telling Ruth, that you left your mother and your father, you left your homeland, your native land, and going to people that you did not know before. This is exactly paraphrasing. Boaz is paraphrasing the Torah in Lech Lecha, just what Abraham did. So now Boaz blesses her. And Boaz says, may the Lord reward your deeds, and may your reward be full. In other words, 100% reward, not lacking anything, from the Lord of God, God of Israel. That this is from, that's going to be lacking anything. Under whose wings you have come to take shelter. Since, young lady, you have come under the wings of the divine presence. We call it kanfei Shechina, the wings of the divine presence, that you're going to be sheltered with abundance. You're in the best possible place it can be anywhere, under the wings of the divine presence. And this is the blessing that Boaz gives her. And we see she gets the blessing. Ultimately, she is the great-grandmother of the king of Israel and the ancestor of Mashiach. What greater blessing. And she was speechless. She didn't know how to express her gratitude, not only the water and the protection, and now the blessings, phenomenal blessings. And this is from the leader, the spiritual leader of Judea, to get such a blessing. It's money in the bank. So in verse 13, she says, "Let me find favor in your eyes, my Lord." She's talking to him, my Lord, with a small L. "For you have comforted me, and you have spoken to the heart of your handmaid, but I'm not worthy to even be one of your handmaids." What is she saying? She's saying, "Look, I'm foreign born from the seed of Moab. I'm not one of these born in tribe of Judah girls here." So ultimately, Boaz says, you're no less, maybe even more. So Boaz says to her, now she says, "Thank you again." So Boaz is not finished. Every time she says thank you, Boaz adds on another blessing. So in verse 14, Boaz says to her at mealtime. Why Boaz says to her at mealtime? Boaz also was very modest. He didn't want to think that anybody would gossip after him and say that not at mealtime he's talking to one of the female gleaners. No, he said at mealtime. He says, "Come." He saw she was sitting by herself. He said, "Come and partake of the bread." In other words, the bread that we prepared, the bread means the meal we prepared for the workers, and dip your morsel of bread in the vinegar. So there's a few things, but I mean, dip in the vinegar. Why in the vinegar? Vinegar is something that in the summer in the south of Israel we eat because vinegar prevents dehydration. Vinegar is makes it by a little bit acidic, and when the body's alkalinic, the body perspires more. When the body's acidic, it preserves water more. She was out in the hot sun all day long, and Boaz says, "Come, this will revive you." And he called her to sit down beside the reapers, and he handed her what's called keli. Keli is an ancient Israeli snack. It's parched grain. You take grain and you put it over the fire, and you caramelize it, and you eat it like popcorn. And she ate a little bit. She ate a tiny bit, and she was sated. She left over. What did she do with the leftovers? She took the leftovers and she put in her scarf leftover bread and the leftover parched grain, the keli, to take back to her mother-in-law. She's not thinking of herself. And she ate so little. And we see that she ate so little because usually, what does a person do after a big meal? You certainly can't get up. You want to sit and rest and drink a cup of coffee and relax for a while. She's right back on her feet before anyone, and she's back to gleaning. She's not wasting a single minute, which is another indication that she just ate the bare minimum, what she needed for her existence. So then in verse 15, Torah said right away, she rose to glean, and Boaz now orders his servant saying, "Let her glean among the sheaves and don't embarrass her." Okay, put it up. She's not going to stay at the back with just where the fallen seeds. She can now take fallen sheaves if she wants to, and don't yell at her, don't scold her. And in verse 16, he says, pretend, says to his reapers, to drop a couple of the bundles for her and leave it so that she can glean it, and don't scold her. So Boaz is telling her that he doesn't want to feed her directly because he doesn't want to embarrass her. He doesn't give her a handout. He wants to think that she's working for it, but it's really behind the scenes. This is Hashem by way of Boaz. Okay, that's his feeding. So what ultimately, Ruth is going to take all that grain at the end of the day, and she is going to separate it from the chaff, and she'll grind it into meal, and she'll take home meal right away to give her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law can bake bread. So she gleaned in verse 17, she gleaned in the field until evening, and she beat out what she had gleaned. You know, what was you beat? You take the grain and you beat it on the ground, and it separates the grain from the chaff. And the chaff is straw. Take the straws, feed that to the animals, and the grain she took, and she, together with the grain that she had gleaned, she took it and gave her what she'd left over after being saved, the food she'd left over from her mealtime. So now she's back in the city with her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law said, oh, boy, she came back with a nice little sack of grain. And she says, where have you gleaned today? And where have you worked? And may he who took heed of you be blessed. In other words, you can't steal something like that. You took that of someone's field, and someone saw that you took this grain out and grounded it to field. So she told her mother-in-law what happened to her. And she says, the man who I worked for was Boaz. Oh, so what did Naomi said, may he take heed of you. Naomi is also on a very high spiritual level, also from the tribe of Judah, from the same family. And she is praying that Boaz pay attention to her. Naomi has this plan that Boaz should like Ruth and want to marry Ruth, and that Boaz should inherit Elimelech's tribal lands that came by way of Kilion and Machlon. Okay, Kilion doesn't have any rights to it because his wife is back in Moab. Kilion's there, so Machlon gets the rights, and the rights go to Ruth, and together with Naomi. So whoever marries Ruth gets the rights to Kilion and Machlon's land, which is Elimelech's land, because Kilion and Machlon, they inherit Elimelech, and they get Ruth. But we'll see in chapter 4, you can't take the land if you don't marry the widow. This is a levirate marriage. We'll also learn levirate marriage. Again, what it means is they have to, it comes in a package deal, old package deal. This is levirate marriage together with the land inheritance comes in a package deal. So this is Naomi's plan. This is Naomi's plan to bring her daughter-in-law into her own family. Okay, so Naomi said to her daughter-in-law in verse 20, blessed be he of the Lord who did not leave off his kindness with the living or with the deceased. In other words, the fact that Hashem led Ruth to the field of a kinsman, this is unbelievable kindness because it's still within the family. And this is why Naomi emphasizes at the end of verse 20, the man is our kinsman, he is our near kinsman. So what did she mean by the living and the deceased? That Hashem sustains the living and he occupies himself with the needs of the deceased. Machlon, it doesn't have peace in the world to come because he never had a son. So by his wife giving birth to a son through levirate marriage in the family, this and the son will continue on. And Machlon, this is part of the secret of levirate marriage, that Machlon in the next world, he'll have complete peace. So in verse 21, Ruth the Moabitess said, there's something for the levirate marriage, it's a little bit confusing, but we'll learn it more and more. This is called Yebum. There's a whole tractate in the Gemara written Yevamot, exactly what happened. Just to explain it briefly, we'll go on again. If a man is married and dies and does not leave a son, that the widow cannot marry whoever she wants. The widow must marry one of the brothers. And one of the brothers is called the Yevum. And the woman is called the Yevamah. This is a levirate marriage. So the living brother marries the widow, and then the firstborn child is named after the deceased husband. And it's actually, according to Kabbalah, that the soul of the deceased husband comes down and a new correction in this new son. But this is actually the biological father is his brother. So the new son is actually the soul of his brother that's now married to his former wife, to his widow. Okay, that's a levirate marriage. And that's one of the laws of Torah. Today, we don't exercise. The rabbis discourage levirate marriage, and we have what's called a chalitza service, where we suggest to the young man, don't do to say that you don't want to take her, and he takes off a shoe. There's a ceremony, and she spits in front of him, and she says, "This should be to a person that doesn't want to fulfill his brother's home." And this is called chalitza. Okay, but we'll explain this more and more as we'll explain this in next week's lesson. Okay, so in verse 21, Ruth the Moabitess says, he also said to me, you shall stay with my youths until they finish my entire harvest. In other words, what's that? Boaz's entire harvest. Boaz is just one field. He's a very wealthy landowner. He has one field here, one field there, one field there. And there's two harvests going on. There is the barley harvest, that's early. Then there's the wheat harvest. So Boaz means until all his fields are harvested, Ruth shall be with him. This will take care of the next 3 or 4 months. So at least for now, until things turn out, Boaz knows that Ruth and Naomi will have an income. Okay, so Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, this is good, my daughter, that you go out with his maidens in his field and do not go in any other field. So Naomi again warns her, don't think that the grass is greener anywhere else. So he said, well, why does Naomi need to warn her? There's an expression in the Gemara, ein mezarzim ela mezurazim, that you don't encourage someone in agility that they're already not agile. They're agile. In other words, we have a joke in Israel that someone gives a lecture, a rabbi gives a lecture about modesty. Who comes to the rabbi's lecture on modesty for women? The most modest women in the city. If they want to get even more modest. The women that need to hear the lecture, they're not there. Okay, this is what the Gemara tells us. And this is what Naomi is encouraging to Ruth. So in the final verse in chapter 2, verse 23, and she stayed with Boaz's maidens to glean until the completion of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. And we see they have all the time. Boaz is looking in the background to make sure they have a place to be, they have a place to income. Naomi is looking in the background to this chance encounter between, but chance, I said, there's no chance, but that's what the book of Ruth says, the chance encounter, that it should be permanent, and we'll see what happens. If you can see what's going on, that in the meanwhile, we have in the back of our mind that there's a closer member of kin in Boaz. So what's going on here? What's going on here? Will this succeed? Because Boaz is second in line. Boaz cannot take Ruth as a wife and inherit the tribal lands unless the next of kin, the closer next of kin, he declines. So there's this suspense, underlying suspense, and we'll see. Will Mashiach come? Will he not come? And this is all what's going on with the birth of King David. As we learned last week, this was not easy. Anytime we have holiness, we have starch, opposition from the evil inclination. King David talks about the book of Psalms. We learned this in our lesson in the book of Psalms, that the people were against him in the opposition. One of them was a dark side rabbi, who was also a general in Saul's army. His name was Doeg the Edomite. Doeg the Edomite, when King David was a young boy, and they were threatened by Goliath and the Philistines. And David, as a young bar mitzvah boy, he heard this Philistine giant threatening and blaspheming God. He couldn't stand to hear it. He couldn't stand this, made his blood boil. So he went to the king and he said to the king, I'll fight him. And so King Saul didn't know who the lad was. So he said to Doeg, who is that lad? And he says, oh, him? He's from the king says he looks like, King Saul said he looks like he's worthy of monarchy, from a very, look at his bravery, he's worthy of monarchy. So Doeg says worthy of monarchy, maybe he's not even worthy of being a Jew. His great-grandmother was a Moabitess. But one thing, the reason that Samuel the prophet wrote the book of Ruth was to show the religious court ruling that Boaz gave. Boaz gave this from the Midrash tells us from Ruach HaKodesh, that a voice came out of heaven and clarified to him that it's a Moabite that's not allowed to come into Jewish people. Moabitess, yes, is allowed. And Boaz gave this down as religious court ruling even before he met Ruth. And Samuel the prophet, he wrote this as a precedent. So anyone seeing the future, just another Ruth, any other Ruth comes along, that she's welcome in the fold. And together with this week's Parsha, which is Kedoshim. We read double Parsha, Achimot Kedoshim. In the Parsha of Kedoshim, which means you should be holy, there is a law. You should love the righteous convert. Love the righteous convert. You love, it's just like you love your neighbor, you love yourself. Love the righteous convert. No daylight between the righteous convert and us. But they came in, even more so. It came in. This is something, and we see this in the book of Ruth. And B'ezrat Hashem, take a look at the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth teaches us good character. The book of Ruth teaches us emunah. The book of Ruth teaches us divine providence.